Good afternoon and welcome to you to this topic. How corrupt is the BBC? Well, it's a moot question because many people think it is corrupt, but I'm going to just put forward some ideas and thoughts, and please feel free to like, subscribe, and make any comments. I'll make it open for comments, and I really would welcome your comments. Just a few initial points, and then I'll wind it up. It's not going to be a long one. There's a book called The Noble Liar: How and Why the BBC Distorts the News to Provide a Liberal Agenda. It's by a man called Robin Aitken, and he was a BBC reporter for 25 years at quite a senior level. The book is called The Noble Liar, and that's about the BBC's liberal agenda. I'll come back to that later in the video. Secondly, Huw Edwards. Huw Edwards was the reason I got rid of my TV license 2 years ago. It's a shocking story of child paedophilia. He served no prison time, despite depraved child pornography. This 63-year-old man saved imagery of about over 40 children, many of whom were infants. He got a suspended sentence for that. A suspended sentence. Just to let you know that the type of pornography that Huw Edwards was looking at is categorized as the worst form of pornography that you can actually look at. So there we have Huw Edwards, the famous newsreader who read the evening news on the BBC. Thirdly, Jimmy Savile. The name is notorious. The immunity of power. Around 450 people were abused by him, possibly more. He died in 2011. And his case led to Operation U-Tree that identified many paedophiles, some of whom were working in the BBC. I haven't got time to go into any details of all of them, if you like, of all of the paedophiles within the BBC, but there were several key ones. I've already mentioned Huw Edwards. I've already mentioned Jimmy Savile. And Jimmy Savile, as I say, was notorious. Fourthly, Rolf Harris, the fall of an icon. This man was loved by the British public. He was charged with 12 attacks on 4 young girls from 1968 to 1986. He was found guilty and sentenced to 5 years and 9 months. That was back in 2012. He was let out early on the grounds of poor health. He died in 2023. Aged 93 years. The death of another icon, somebody who was, unlike Savile, who escaped justice. Rolf Harris didn't. Then a name that you may not be familiar with. This man was a Radio 1 DJ, a guy called Chris Denning. He was linked to Savile. He actually had links with Savile. He was a prolific paedophile who liked young boys. He was described as utterly depraved, and he died in prison in 2022. Now, I mention him because he was a Radio 1 DJ, as was Jimmy Savile back in the 1960s and 70s. Forgive me while I turn over the page. Sorry about that. The joys of ancient technology. So just a few final points to wrap up. The BBC is great to work for, but it's a very liberal workplace. But it's liberal as long as it's the type of liberality that the BBC like. Secondly, it was a breeding ground, the BBC, of powerful, untouchable, rich men like Huw Edwards, like Jimmy Savile, who were corrupt sexually. There was little accountability. There was little checks. Now, the BBC probably in 2025 will say, well, it's better now. But you do have to ask the question, is it really? Huw Edwards' trial, thirdly, Huw Edwards' trial in 2024 shows the establishment's leniency and no deterrence for future offenders. If you are viewing the worst type of child sex abuse, giving a man a suspended sentence like they did with Huw Edwards, where is the justice in that? Remember that those children photographed are being abused. His child photos were of the worst kind. So that's Huw Edwards. Fourthly, the BBC reliance on the TV licence fee must be cut. I would argue that we need market forces to take over. There's far too much taxation, and it shouldn't be a criminal case if you don't pay your TV license. You should just be able to opt out of it. I opted out 2 years ago in the Huw Edwards fiasco. There must be a genuine reflection in the BBC of British society with far less left-wing bias, far less, I don't like using the word, but it sums them up, far less woke ideology. Now, although he isn't a paedophile or anything of that nature, Gary Lineker was finally kicked out of the BBC in 2025. Here was a man, a football commentator, who was commentating on all sorts of things that he really didn't have a clue about, particularly Middle Eastern politics. But here's a good example of a star, somebody with little accountability. I'm not in any way saying that Gary Lineker is a paedophile, but I'm saying that there is lack of accountability by the BBC. They're paying the man's wages. They're paying salary towards his production company, and he's then sounding off with no comeback at all. Finally, he was asked to depart the BBC in 2025. So finally, my last point, if you like, my fifth point, how corrupt is the BBC? Well, I would suggest to you, do like and comment if you like this. By all means, disagree with me. Is it beyond cure? I would suggest that it's beyond cure. It needs scrapping. It needs disestablishment, tearing apart from the establishment, the woke left-wing establishment in the British or English metropolitan elite. The BBC is fine if you agree with it. I think I have complained to the BBC. Well, I've lost count, but they examine themselves. There's no independent examination, and they are notoriously biased against a variety of things. They are notoriously not a public service broadcaster. They are notoriously biased against, for example, and they have admitted it themselves, they are biased against Israel and ergo the Jewish people. That's just one example, but there are many, many others. I'll leave it with you. Do feel free to like, subscribe to my channel, and do leave a comment. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. Goodbye and God bless you.